Anytime I'm even close to hearing Dwight Tillery speak, I got to be there. Dwight Tillery can bring a message any day, any time. You know, when you're asked to, and I'm being very honest with you, when you're asked to introduce someone like Mayor Tillery, it is very difficult. I know that you can read his bio, and I'm certain he wouldn't really want me to go and read all of that because he's done those things, but he's done so much more. You know, I was thinking about how would I describe Dwight to someone, and I'd first say very loyal. He is a loyal friend. You have to understand, Dwight was one of the first people I met when I came to Cincinnati, and he has been a loyal friend, trusted friend, from day one. Now, we don't talk every day. I'm praying for him. I'm certain he's praying for me. But if I ever needed anything, Dwight's going to be one of the first people I call. He is a brilliant man. He is brilliant, a visionary. He's a giant in this city. I call him an icon because when he was elected mayor of Cincinnati, I'll never forget seeing the headline. Everybody was surprised. I wasn't surprised at all. I knew Dwight was destined to be the mayor. And he worked, and he worked to change this city that our children's children and their children will benefit from down the road. A God-fearing man, a talented man. You know his work in politics and in law, and you know what he's doing as really the president is talking to everyone. That's the great thing about the president. He speaks to everyone and says, you know, we have a collective responsibility. And that's how Mayor Tillery, he's my mayor, so I still call, you know, when you're the mayor or the governor, once a mayor, always a mayor. And one time, our mutual friend, C. Smith, we were at C. Smith's studio. And you know, we call him Dwight, but we said, you know what, we have to call you Mayor Tillery. So people understand that you were the mayor of Cincinnati. I could tell you all this, but when I tell you that I appreciate him, I love him, I know how hard he's worked for this city to change it, to make it better. And what he's doing to awaken our senses to the disparity that exists in health. I mean, that has been his mission for the past 10 plus years. And he has made huge inroads into changing those numbers, not only here in Cincinnati, but throughout this state. And what's happening here, the ripple effect is impacting really the country and the world. You can make a difference. As the theme of today is so powerful, the change begins with you and me. So I bring forward my friend, my hero, the one and only Dwight Tillery.
Before the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth, we were here. Before the pen of Thomas Jefferson etched the majestic words of the Declaration of Independence across the pages of history, We were here. More than 2 centuries, our forebears labored in this country without wages. They made cotton king. They built homes of their slave masters while suffering gross injustices and shameful humiliation. Yet, out of the bottomless pit of vitality, they continued to thrive and develop. If the inexcusable cruelties of slavery could not stop us, the opposition we now face will surely fail. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. First, I want to thank Curtis for those kind words. Curtis is such a tremendous person and works very hard, not only on his day job, but in his job in the community. He's a great, great man and a great friend, and I appreciate having the opportunity to call him a friend publicly. I also want to thank Brother Herschel Chalk for recommending me to be the speaker this afternoon. And I do want to thank and congratulate all of the honorees this afternoon. I just opened my speech with a quote from Dr. King. How many of you have ever heard of that quote? Dr. King was a great man, a man of great courage, dedication, commitment, compassion, and determination to change this country from 2 nations, one black and one white, one viewed as superior and one viewed as inferior. In 1968, I was involved in the civil rights movement on the UC's campus. And I was one of the founders of the Black Student Union and its second president. I was profoundly impacted by King's leadership, and I was selected by the president to represent the university at King's funeral. Like so many Americans, I was deeply saddened, shocked, and angry that Dr. King had been murdered. During his lifetime, Dr. King raised a fundamental question about humanity. It was the age-old biblical scripture that we should do unto others as we would have others do unto us. But this nation began with the enslavement of black people. And 100 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, this nation was still struggling with the rights and roles of a people who looked different from the majority and were being treated as second class. Dr. King's quote was from many inspirational speeches he gave to his followers when the movement would weaken and an air of despair would permeate his followers. This quote gives us an insight into the historical struggle of black folks in this land determined to be free. I've read a lot about slavery, the cruelty inflicted on my people, from the 1940s to the 1960s. We faced the fire hoses, billy clubs, and our children being attacked and taunted just because they wanted to attend a public school to get a better education. And even while traveling this nation, we weren't able to eat at a public restaurant and denied the use of public restrooms. This was such a hurtful and humiliating experience. During the modern day civil rights movement, King would remind the marchers of our history as slaves and what we had to endure, and that we've come too far to turn back now. But how? How were we able to withstand this long struggle for equality? How were we able to take the cruelty, the crushing insults, and violence heaped on us? How did Dr. King Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth, Jesse Jackson, John Lewis, and Andy Young marched straight into the face of those police dogs, water hoses, and billy clubs. What manner of men were these? What were they made of? What was so important about ending discrimination and segregation that caused these men to put their very lives on the line? Dr. King was a man of many talents. He was a preacher, civil rights leader, humanitarian, author, father, husband, and a black man who had hopes and dreams for himself, for his family, and this nation. He was truly an extraordinary man, not because of any title or position he held, nor because of the people he knew, where he lived, or even his phenomenal oratorical skills, but because he had an unrelenting conscience that would not allow him to look away from the wrongdoings of this society, no matter who was committing them. Notwithstanding the terrible acts of violence, hate, and even the threat of death, Dr. King continued to face nonviolently the evil of that time, racial bigotry. Dr. King confronted the morality of this nation for how it treated certain members of society simply because of the color of their skin. People who had been slaves in this nation, and although free, were second-class citizens. So, Brother Dwight, what does this have to do with the theme of today's program? A change in you, a change in me. I'm glad you asked. The question I want to ask you, because you're sitting so quietly and attentively, I know you got your mind working, but I want to raise this question. Why do most of us witness immorality and injustice and simply look the other way? Why is it that far too many of us are willing to see others mistreated, no matter what the circumstances might be, and simply look the other way? Every day we witness some form of injustice, cruelty, inequity, and wrongdoing in this society, and we go on with our lives as business as usual. We do nothing and we say nothing. My thoughts about Dr. King and his life go way beyond the fact that he led countless marches for equality and was ultimately murdered. He had an unrelenting conscience. He valued righteousness more than wealth, more than fame, and more than his very own life. Dr. King once said, the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. Too many of us are willing to sacrifice our principles of integrity, our morals, our sense of justice, and fair play for comfort, convenience, and yes, opportunity. Yes, opportunity. You know, we ought to be outraged. We ought to be outraged that in a land of plenty, that we have so many people living on the streets of America, families living in automobiles as their homes. Did you hear what I said? Living in automobiles as if it was their homes. Unemployment and underemployment, worst ever. Childhood poverty in Cincinnati is the third highest in the nation. But we're willing to pay for stadiums and trolley cars. Help me with this. High school dropouts numbers continue to soar. More people are incarcerated in this nation than any other country in the world. Violence runs rampant on our streets and in our schools. We've become a nation of haves and have-nots. Let me tell you something. America isn't broke. It's the poor people in America who are broke. 2% of this population controls the majority of the wealth in this nation. The Pew Foundation reported in the fall of 2011 that the wealth of the average white family was $100,000, while the average wealth of a black family was just a little over $5,000. I bet you didn't even know that, did you? Black Americans bear the burden of sickness and premature death. The infant mortality rate of black babies in Hamilton County is 3 times that of white babies. 100 years ago, it was the same rate. The same rate. We can bail out Wall Street, but we can't fix the neighborhood streets. We can bail out the banks, but the banks can't bail us out. The great philosopher Edmund Burke once said, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. Are you doing nothing? Are you in the room here with me? Are you listening to what I'm saying? You see, it is my belief that King stood for more than ending segregation and discrimination. It was his conscience that caused him to get involved in the Poor People's March, the sanitation workers' strike in Memphis, Tennessee, and to march against the Vietnam War. Dr. King was a Baptist preacher trained in the Judeo-Christian principles. He believed in treating others as he would want to be treated. He didn't take on the cause of racism in his country just because he was black. He took it on because of his immorality. Yes. As we begin to look at the issues facing this world, my brothers and sisters, we must face the fact that we're all on this earth together. Whether it's global warming or selling cigarettes to third world countries or selling drugs to our brothers and sisters on the streets of this nation, we're all impacted by what we do to one another or what we fail to do for each other. In August of 1963, King's famous speech rocked this nation in its challenges and desires. King said that we should judge a man not by the color of his skin, but by the content of his character. My brothers and sisters, he was speaking to us as well. You see, as human beings, no matter what color you might be, your character matters more than your color. It matters how we respect one another, how we love and protect our children, and how we take care of the community that we live in. Yes. It is our character that matters, not who we know or how much money we have. It is having the courage and the decency to do the right thing. Dr. King said the time is always right to do what's right. You see, King's mission was to stir the conscience of America, to cause all of us to look inside of ourselves. What do you see? What have you done with the opportunity to be free? Has the Emancipation Proclamation made a difference in the lives of Black America? Or have we moved from a slavery of whips and chains to a slavery of mental behavior? How do we feel about ourselves as individuals and as a race of people? I'm asking you these questions this afternoon. Are you listening to me? Yes. What do we stand for and what's in our hearts? I'm telling you, I'll be 65 this March. I remember myself as a young man starting in this community. And as I look back, I wonder what has happened to us as a people. Let me explain to you what I mean. A few months ago, I was riding my stationary bike while watching an interview with Chris Rock. Now, I don't typically watch Chris, but this morning, he got my attention that morning. The host showed a clip from one of his performances, and what Chris said to a predominantly black audience was quite profound. He started off by saying, and I quote, "We got a lot of racism going on. Who are most racist, black people or white people? Black people. You know why? Because we hate black people too. Everything white people don't like about black people really don't like about black people. Can't keep a store open more than 3 weeks. Grand opening, grand closing. Can't go to a movie the first week it comes out. Why? Because the ends are shooting at the screen." End of quote. While his routine about us is painfully funny, it is also very truthfully sobering. And it is the truth that makes you wonder what has really happened to our people. What's happened to us? What's happened to the way we think about ourselves? Perhaps the most important thought you ever have is, what do you think about yourself? What do you think about yourself? We formulate our beliefs from what we think, and whatever you believe becomes your reality. But you see, unfortunately, we're in love with the Bad Girls Club, Basketball Wives, booty-shaking videos and rap songs that spew the most vile language. And the young people say, we're just keeping it real. Now some of our sisters have to go on the Maury Povey show to see who their baby daddy is. Brothers walking down the streets with their pants hanging down, with their underwear hanging out. And our sisters showing far too much of your body parts. As a nation of people, we are quickly reducing ourselves from a race of men and women who had such dignity and pride to a people of sex, drugs, ignorance, and violence. What's happened to the grace and integrity that our forefathers had? Our ancestors were kings and queens like Cleopatra and Nefertiti, who set the highest standards of living and built the Great Pyramids. The very first university in the world was founded in Africa, the University of Timbuktu. Africans were the creators of architecture, mathematics, medicine, science, arts, and astrology. We have a glorious history of scholars, educators, inventors, artists, scientists, builders, doctors, lawyers, entertainers, and theologians. African Americans have contributed as much to this nation as any other group. How dare we disgrace and dishonor our history with the madness that's going on in our communities? Amen. We say nothing, we do nothing. Carter G. Woodson, the father of black history, once said, and I quote, "The problem of holding the Negro down, therefore, is easily solved. When you control a man's thinking, you do not have to worry about his actions. He will find his proper place, and he will stay in it. You do not need to send him to the back door. He will go without being told. In fact, if there is no back door, he will cut one for his special benefit." We got a backdoor mentality. You see, if you change the way you think about yourself, you can change your life. A person who loves and believes in himself and has the courage to act on that belief can move from poverty to wealth, from obscurity to fame, move from drug addiction to being drug-free, and from confusion to a peace of mind. You are limited in life by your own thinking, not by your color, not by your gender, or your socioeconomic situation. These are only superficial obstacles. Unless you got a backdoor mentality. We are facing some very difficult times in this nation, whether you want to believe it or not. Yes, we're having some individual success. We even have a president of the United States who is black. But as a race of people, we are falling back. We're falling way back. My brothers and sisters, there's an urgency to think differently about ourselves and each other. Yes, racism is alive and well in America, but we don't have to aid and abet it by calling each other the N-word. Why would white America even think about its racist ways when they see how we talk to each other, how we treat one another? Some of our folks are so lost. We have this ridiculous idea that it's okay to call each other the N-word. But it's not okay for whites to call us that word. There isn't a better example of how we have allowed racism to become imbued in our culture than calling each other the N-word. And I heard some folks got all upset about Django. Give me a break. Give me a break. Listen to your mentality. Oh, let me bring it home. Right here in Cincinnati, we have a guy named Willie Cunningham with a national television show. And on his show, his audience is primarily black. And the guests on the show are mostly black. Now, here's a guy who made his fortune by downgrading black people for years on his radio show. And now we're letting him use us on his national television show, exploiting the worst about some of us while he's laughing all the way to the bank. Why, it's nothing but a modern-day minstrel show, except there is no painted black faces. I don't know why so many of us have taken a turn for the worse. But I refuse to believe that we can't make a turn for what's right. Slavery was cruel and painful. Discrimination and segregation was cruel and painful. But our forebears refused to let the evils of this world reduce them to nothing. They refused to let racism stop them from being who God created them to be. And even under our current situation, we have more of an opportunity to turn things around in our people who were enslaved. Under slavery, slaves were forbidden to read or write, but many of them learned anyway. How can we come this far, and deny ourselves our rightful place in this nation? What good does it do for us to spend so much of our time blaming white racism? We have to accept the fact that far too many of us hate ourselves and one another. We work against one another. We speak against one another. We tell on one another. We work with the opposition against one another. We got a backdoor mentality. I didn't say I was going to come and be polite today. You see, Dr. King spoke to the evils of humanity, not just to whites, but to blacks as well. And no matter how difficult things got, King kept going forward because he believed that good will always triumph over evil and love will always conquer hate. In closing, I've watched a number of inspirational movies. I watched The Great Debaters. Many of you seen that movie? The Great Debaters? I watched it for encouragement. The president of Wiley College in the movie was an actual person who walked from Florida to Boston to go to school to get his PhD. Y'all didn't hear me. I said he walked from Florida to Boston to get his PhD. We got some kids in our communities that won't go to school if you took them in a limousine. What's happened to us? Where is that change? I love the movie The Pool, where young black inner city kids not only learned how to swim in a rundown swimming pool, but also became champions. And in the movie The Help, where black women in the South labored under slave-like conditions but never lost their dignity or support for one another. Never lost it. Recently, I watched an interview with Gabby Douglas, who spoke about her challenges in becoming a world-class gymnast. She was met with racism. She left her hometown, leaving her family behind because she had a goal for herself. Gabby made great sacrifices in developing her craft. Here she had to deal with a sport dominated mostly by young and often well-to-do white girls in an environment less than welcoming. And at the Olympics, I could still see her with her body just stretched out. She soared in her routine with such grace and class. And yet, our own people were making fun of her hair. The truth about those who were making fun of this young lady's hair has to do, even today, with the shame of their own hair. Your hair is nappy, so what? So what? When we embrace ourselves? I watched her interview with such admiration and respect and pride of this young lady of 16. I saw in her the courage of Harriet Tubman, the dignity of Sojourner Truth, and the determination of Rosa Parks. My brothers and sisters, I still believe today that we can still get to the promised land. Thank you.